this is where I think nootropics are really indispensable, because the good nootropics, the right ones, will fuel us with motivation, focus, and imperviousness to distraction. And they do it fast. They do it within 30 or 60 minutes of dosage, and you've got the motivation that you need.
I don't believe that motivation comes from pills. Motivation comes from aiming at the right thing. Jonathan Roseland, welcome to Manifesto's YouTube channel, and good to see you eventually after some really interesting exchanges over email already. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, likewise, Paul. I have got the dream team of caffeine, L-theanine, and nicotine in my system. So fully primed to have a really deep, wide-ranging discussion with you.
That sounds great. Yeah, I remember if you drink a cup of coffee before you run a 5-kilometer race, you'll actually perform slightly better. But if you drink the coffee before you run a 10-kilometer race, it'll actually decrease your performance. So let's go for the short and hard conversation, I guess, then, if you're all tanked up on all of that stuff. So yeah, Jonathan, you are a biohacker, what was it, neuroscience strategist?
Applied neuroscience strategist.
Applied neuroscience strategist. You run something called Limitless Mindset, and it's just packed with all kinds of advice and tips and different tools that one can use to do this thing called biohacking, which is really something that's exploded, I guess, in recent years. And I'm actually familiar with a lot of these techniques and approaches, and I've myself found value in using many of these tools. And at the same time, I'm very skeptical about the foundational narrative and ideas behind the whole biohacking movement. So we're going to have a conversation today about some of the techniques and tools, first of all, and then I think we're also going to go into that meta discussion and hopefully have something where we can try and understand each other better and see if we can develop our thinking around these things as well. So the thing that you kind of got me with, Jonathan, in our email exchange, and I thought that sounds interesting, is you said you had a monogamy biohack, or a mindset monogamy biohack that could like really shift one's mindset. So do you want to start us off with that?
Sure thing. So the major challenge that men have that are making this transition from you're like a single guy and you're trying to lock down a lady, you're trying to get a wife, and of course before that you have to get a girlfriend, and then before that you have to get a date. And for a lot of that time, as you're a single guy, your mindset should really be kind of this abundance mindset where you are kind of willing to take it or leave it in the relationship, where you have this level of commitment that starts out being very, very low when your first conversation with the lady. Your level of commitment is like 0, and then your first date, your level of commitment is like 5%, and then a month in, your level of commitment is maybe 20, and then by the time that you're 6 months or 9 months in, your level of commitment should be quite a bit higher. But this abundance mindset, it certainly makes the man more, in most cases, with most women, it makes the man a lot more attractive to that point where he can hook the woman and elicit that commitment from her. But the big challenge that I certainly ran into, and I think a lot of guys that are like personal development focused guys, the big challenge is you spend years and years of your life with this kind of like abundance, take it or leave it kind of mindset with women. And then you get engaged or you get married and you're supposed to switch directly over to this 100% till death do us part mindset. And for me, that was really not a light switch flipping over kind of thing. And when I got married, I promised myself, promised my wife that I would never cheat, never have an affair. But what lingered from my previous life of being this non-committal, promiscuous kind of guy was this mindset that because of evolutionary psychology, I, as a man, have a hardwired, non-negotiable need to enjoy the beauty of various women. That I, as a man, because I have got testosterone pumping in my blood, I have this need that I can't really do very much about. Sorry, babe. I have this need to at least like look at other women and enjoy their beauty on some regularity. And this is something that I thought it was something that I could make work in our marriage, but it ended up being a huge sabotaging thing that ended up causing betrayal trauma for her, that ended up causing incredible amounts of pain and frustration for me. And my wife and I had several very serious conversations about this when we were, I don't know, a year and a half into the marriage. And I decided that I needed to change this thing about myself, which I didn't think I could change. And so what I turned to for this is a meditation method, which was initially developed by this guy named Dr. Joe Dispenza. Have you heard of him?
The name, yeah. I think he's popped up on some social media feeds for me. Definitely, yeah. I've never followed him in depth at all, but I definitely
sure. He wrote this very good book called You Are the Placebo, and it's all about the placebo effect, which is the most powerful and consistent phenomena in gold science, in gold standard science, in human clinical trials. Hundreds of thousands of human clinical trials with many millions of subjects. And they prove over and over and over the powerful, powerful effect of our belief. And so he had developed over the course of a lot of scientific observation and over the course of hundreds and hundreds of workshops and thousands of participants, this meditation method for epigenetically ingraining beliefs, for taking a belief and patterning that belief onto the epigenome, which is the epigenome. You cannot change your genes unless you took a certain medical intervention from Big Pharma in the last couple of years. But your epigenome, you have the human agency, that divine spark that was given to us by our creator. That manifests on the biological level with the ways that we can hack our epigenome. And so this particular meditation technique, it's a 50-minute guided meditation that you go through. And I can just describe it briefly. Is you start by doing kind of this body awareness thing where you move your consciousness around to different areas of your body. And then you expand your consciousness to the room that you are in. And then you imagine expanding your consciousness out into the entire universe, out into that great unknowable expanse of God's creation. And when you expand your consciousness out to that level, you go through what they call a ego dissolution exercise, where you imagine yourself as this as a quantum being that can travel at light speed through the cosmos, that can be anywhere. Or you imagine yourself as a wave instead of as a particle. So you go through this ego dissolution step, detaching yourself from your physical and lived experience. And then in that state, before going into the meditation, you select two beliefs. You select a limiting belief. You select something that you might think about yourself, you might believe about yourself, something that might even be true, that you think is holding you back and not serving you. And then you select a replacement empowering belief. And the replacement empowering belief, that doesn't necessarily have to be something that's rational. That just has to be something that is useful and is going to serve you. And so in my case, the old toxic belief that I wanted to get rid of was that I needed visual variety with women, that I needed to sate myself with the beauty of the visage of multitudinous women. That was the old belief. And then the new belief was, well, I did this several different times, but it was, my wife is enough for me. My wife is the most sexy, beautiful. She's all that I want. I am totally satisfied with my wife's beauty, and that's all I want. And so in that state of ego dissolution, you do a emotional rejection of that old belief. You say, no, I don't want to believe that old way anymore. And then you feel it deeply. You feel it deeply throughout your, Dr. Dispenza talks about this as an epigenetic thing. And I can feel that. I can feel that belief changing in my body when I do this meditation. And then you say, what is the new belief that you want? And you accept the new belief, and you can feel that absorbing in your body via the prompts of the guided meditation. And then you take those two beliefs and you offer them up to a higher power. And then the rest of the meditation concludes with a future casting of gratitude, of dwelling in a deep sense of gratitude for the kind of future and the kind of life that you're going to have with that new belief in place. And so I did that a couple of times, and that really enabled me to do a 180 on the promiscuous mindset that I went into my marriage with. And at this point, I have been no fabbing for 3 years now. And temptation to look at naughty things on the internet, or temptation to oogle women out in the streets or at the gym. This temptation is not totally gone, but at this point, it is like brushing a bug off my shirt. It is so very manageable at this point. So I feel like I've achieved a level of focus, of sexual laser-like focus on my wife that I didn't think I could get to this point. And it has put that struggle. It's put that struggle with lust behind me. And it's also freed me from any kind of FOMO. It's freed me from comparison. It's freed me from looking at other women and saying, oh, I wonder what it would be like to go and approach her and have some kind of relationship with her. It's been a tremendously liberating thing that's been very, very good for our marriage and for our sex life. And it's kind of it's kind of an unconventional approach to flipping the switch on monogamy, but it really has worked very, very well. So I'd urge men that still struggle with this a bit, which is probably quite a few, I'd urge them to give that 50-minute meditation a shot.
Mm-hmm. That's a fantastic story, Jonathan, and fantastic to hear. And yeah, I just met your wife before we started this conversation. And the first thing I said to you after I had a little chat with her was, wow, it's so great as a guy to have a woman, a partner, a wife who supports you on your mission. And it's so powerful. So that was, I could really sense the decision that you guys had made to focus on each other and to develop and grow something together. And that there was a commitment there in the long term that had made you invest. So I think that's beautiful to see. You say it's an unconventional approach. I actually am going to try and argue now why I think what you're doing is actually just treading a very, very well-worn path of Christianity, which people have just been disconnected from. Because I think I can explain exactly all the steps that you took in that process there from a Christian perspective in a way that's actually far deeper and makes more sense than the kind of modernist, slightly new age, flipping kind of fluffy hippie stuff that, I mean, some of this stuff gets a little bit fluffy, right? With like, oh, you're a quantum wave speeding through the universe, stuff like that. But there's an element of truth in it, and that's why these kind of things work as well. So I want to start with, there were several steps in your kind of presentation, and you started with the dating thing. And for me, I think, when we go out and you start looking for a partner in life, then I think that everything depends on what is the end goal that you're aiming at. And so I think a lot of men start with the end goal of like, I want to get laid. I want to have sex. That's what they get presented with. That's what they think is interesting. That's what boys compete with each other when they're, very immature and in school. But I think from time immemorial, then I think most societies, and especially healthy societies, then it gets imprinted very early on boys, like, the goal of relationship with women is to get married and have a family. And I think that's being lost. And so when they don't have, so this abundance mindset, like I get what you're saying about it, but I think far better than just saying, oh, it's an abundance mindset. It's more like, no, you have a mindset which is focused on the goal, which makes you critical as a man. And so when you meet a woman, you're not just looking to like get laid or to like attract her or to hook her, but instead you're looking to find a woman who can support you in completing your mission in life. And that makes you quite critical about her. And she's going to sense that firmness inside of you, a man who knows who he is, what he wants. And so that's going to be very attractive to her, because women are attracted to men who know where they're going, who know who they are, who have a firm purpose and direction. And because the man's focus in his life, and I was terrible at this. I've had a very, my first relationships, then I was quite focused on finding a partner in life, but then my first marriage broke, actually. So I'm not trying to say I'm the perfect example here. I'm a very bad example. So I had many years of just living a very promiscuous playboy life. But I can really see how when my focus has been on that end goal of creating a long-term marriage, which is what gives one happiness in life. It's what, happiness doesn't come from getting laid a lot, right? Then I've been far more attractive to the right kind of women. There's been plenty of women who are happy to spend a lot of time with me when I'm in this playboy mindset. But these are people who are really just, playing out their dysfunctional traumas with each other a lot of the time and not actually doing anything useful. So I think that's what kind of also then the shift, because the shift is not easy to have this, but and especially because pornography is so big in our society as well. So our minds are just full of these images as well. And so this is something that I agree with you that men fight with all over the place. And when you're talking about this guy and his presentation or this meditation that he had, then I was reminded of a conversation I saw between, I guess you follow Jordan Peterson. He had a conversation. Do you know Jordan Peterson?
Sure thing.
Yeah. So Jordan Peterson, Douglas Murray, political commentator, atheistic, agnostic guy, and Jonathan Pageau. They had this conversation, science versus religion. And it was actually really interesting because what they actually agreed with is that we have this understanding in the West that reality is made out of matter. It's made out of physical stuff. But actually, that's not a very good description of reality. In reality, or actually, reality to a great degree is made up of belief. What I believe about reality determines what I see. If I just look at this cup, or if I'm like a modernist, photorealistic painter and try to reproduce this cup, I could spend months trying to just bring out all the detail of it. And I wouldn't even get a fraction of the detail of what's actually inside of that cup. So, whatever makes this cup into one thing, science can't explain that actually. It's something about the beliefs that I have about what the good life is, which normally includes something like survival. So I could use the cup to drink water. And so that's why I see this cup as a thing. But if I just look at matter from a kind of physical, scientific perspective, then all I have is like kind of seething potential of quantum fields and particles that are, not necessarily joined in any fixed way or anything like that, right? So when you say beliefs manifest in physical reality, epigenetics is a kind of field that's starting to show this, which is something that, religion has known for a very long time, is that our beliefs about reality are far more important. And in this conversation with these guys, I can put a link into the description of this conversation. Basically, they put a very strong case forward that there's a fundamental pattern of existence in life, which is something like the resurrection of Christ. And trying to look at the resurrection of Christ from a scientific and analytical forensic perspective is really a kind of incorrect way of looking at it. Whereas looking at life as this kind of like death and rebirth series of things, like you had some bad ideas and that you allowed them to die and then you were reborn, then this was something that's valuable for you. The problem that I see with these new age systems is that when you do these meditations, then I like it that there's the gratitude. I like it that you're offering up to a higher power. I think these are very good things. But I've spent years of my life diving into Hinduism and Tantra and Buddhism and all these kinds of things. And there's some really big traps there, especially there's kind of like a self-deification that can happen, is that I actually see myself as the center of the universe, the most important thing. It's a natural thing that we're born with. I see myself as the most important thing in the universe, but it's actually an incorrect understanding. And so Christian prayer has all of these same elements in it as well, about letting go of destructive, negative beliefs and being able to adopt newer, better ideas. But instead of it being limited to just what I think might be good, and as you said, I can even replace it with beliefs that aren't rational, that aren't even true, that are actually disconnected from reality. But so it's really guided by what's my teleos. What am I aiming towards? So if I just want to be rich and have lots of sex with lots of different women or whatever it is that I have, right? Then I'm going to choose maybe a belief that's serving that goal. But my perspective is obviously a little bit short term. And so when I'm operating within a tradition, then I'm going to be replacing my own misguided, immature, sometimes rather silly ideas with something that comes from a tradition that's thousands of years old. And that's going to be far more powerful in building a man who stands much firmer than just on his own ideas about the world and what he wants, but something that's been tested and tried through millennia of different, very, very much wiser people who've been working with these things themselves.
Sure. For me, particularly in this sexual area, I had no problems with I think self-deification, as you said, because of how royally I had screwed things up. previous to this betrayal trauma issue, which had stemmed out of my viewing some porn. Previous to this, we discovered that we both had HPV, which came from me. That did not come from her. We discovered that we had HPV, and she had to get surgery for this. It was a big, involved, scary, stressful thing. I had to get warts burned off my dick with a laser. Okay, so I was a long ways away from any type of self deification. Certainly, I was coming into all this with a pretty low kind of view of
humble
myself.
You had some
yeah,
humility.
Good points made.
You had been humble, right?
Yes, by a
Humility
laser.
is a gift. Yeah. No, I think that's, I really appreciate the honesty as well, Jonathan. And I've also made, for me as well, so my story is that I was married but had adopted a kind of materialist secular mindset in my life, rejected all the stuff from my childhood. There was also some mistakes in the stuff from my childhood, but then had kind of gone this, and it was a very selfish way. And what I found is that it just led to collapse and disintegration. But it took me a very long time to admit that. So I really went very far down the road and did some really, really stupid things. So I think that the first step, you going into this meditation, for me, that's a step back away from, just seeing life, the secular worldview, which I think is actually the dominant religion of our time, is secularism. But the problem is when you still kind of say like, oh, I'm a scientist, and then I'm infusing it with these, maybe we're going a little bit towards the meta conversation now, but when I'm infusing it with these kind of spiritual ideas, that's when you get to transhumanism. And I know you're skeptical about transhumanism. So I don't know, maybe you want to put forward your ideas about that and what it is that, how you handle this kind of meeting of, kind of like a spiritual scientism or something like that.
Sure. Before we take on the transhumanists, can I share 2 more monogamy hacks?
Yeah, let's hear them. Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So we started doing nightly validation sessions, is what we call it, because making this shift, the transformative meditation sessions that I suggested helped quite a bit. But on top of that, what really helped was me vocalizing and re-articulating and reinforcing for her the new paradigm. So every night we would cuddle up for about 10 minutes, and I would just describe to her how she was beautiful and sexy to me, and how she blew away all the other women of the past, how no woman from my past life and my travels to other countries, no woman that I ever saw on a screen compared to her, and how she was a constellation of one star in my sexual sky. And I would just re-articulate that and reinforce that to her. And we did that for quite a while. And that really helped to rebuild trust and rebuild self-esteem. And now we have changed that up just a little bit, where we do it on alternating nights, and we tell each other what we appreciate about the other person. Often it's just what little things the other person did that day that we appreciate. So that helped quite a bit with with repairing the betrayal trauma. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing is a biohack also, which is brain training. And there's a particular brain game called dual N back. And it's this brain game that trains your working memory and your executive control and your attentional control. And this brain game, it's not quite like meditation where you need to do it for like 6 months before it really starts helping you. This brain training game starts to really make some noticeable differences after about 20 training sessions. And it helps a whole lot with emotional regulation. It'll just make you a more robust emotional gangster in life. And I find that when I'm consistently doing this brain training, that helps quite a bit with those errant, lustful thoughts that I don't want. That has helped quite a bit with anger management. I had a bit of an anger issue earlier on in our marriage, which I think I've addressed pretty well. So yeah, nightly validation and dual end back brain training can help quite quite a bit when guys just need to upgrade their level of discipline with what's going on in their mind.
Okay. Maybe I can take the opportunity then to share like kind of like the orthodox approach to this, and what it is that I do.
Yep.
I think that the center of it for me is to see my relationship with my wife as an image of the most fundamental sort of pattern of existence in the universe. So existence is about union and marriage of opposites, of polar opposites, which is male and female. It's kind of, the yin yang symbol is a good popular representation of that. But in the Bible, then the Bible actually starts with the marriage, the meeting of Adam and Eve, and them knowing each other, which means them being joined together in sexual union. It actually ends with a marriage feast as well. The very end of the Bible is also a marriage feast. It's the one that comes after the kind of the whole story. Even the very first Christ, when he starts his ministry, when he's incarnated as a man, he starts his ministry as at a marriage. Actually, this is the story of turning the water into wine. So taking something which is just kind of flowing and chaotic and bringing spirit into it as well, turning water into wine. And all through the Bible, you'll see this marriage metaphor used constantly as the fundamental analogy or picture of the relationship between God and mankind. And so, and specifically in the New Testament, it's used as an explanation of Christ and the church. What's the relationship between Christ and the church? Where the man is to represent the position of Christ, and the church is the female. And so it's a mystery. I'm not going to try and explain it here on a podcast because it's something that we believe as Christians, it needs to be understood from within the church to understand it completely. But when I have this understanding and I meditate on this understanding, I contemplate it. I contemplate the mystery of it. I contemplate the nature of God. Towards God, I'm in my feminine. I'm the bride of Christ, right? Then I contemplate the nature of God. Then I understand, well, what brings that together is love. And so love is also something that's mystery. Love is that which can include the multiplicity of the world into one thing without destroying any of the uniqueness of any of the parts. That's what love is, right? And so when I contemplate this, then it also rewires my brain in a way that I gain a deeper understanding of this. I see how it's manifested throughout all of reality. Everywhere the world is made up of God being joined together with everything, right? Or being a part of everything. And so and then I see how I can be playing a part of implementing that pattern in my own life as well. And it's the most beautiful thing to do in reality. I really believe that as two human beings using our own mind and our own abilities and trying to approach each other, what happens is that we can do it sometimes. We can say nice things to each other. We can be sweet. We can be romantic. We can, remind each other. But we hit barriers. And what I found is like in my relationship with my wife, maybe this is just me, but when I really sit down and I say, like, I want to really get my wife to understand me and I want to understand her, then at some point we'll just hit a barrier that we can't get past. And the more I try, actually, the more destructive it gets, and the more we start fighting and disagreeing with each other. And so this thing of union is actually a transcendent thing. It's something where we need something greater than ourselves to be able to do it. And that's why I think these meditations and this, turning to spirituality is actually necessary. And so what it is I think for me, it's like if me and my wife both orientate our attention, instead of trying to get closer to each other, we orientate our attention to the source of divinity, then what happens is that we naturally move towards that, because it's the most powerful and beautiful thing and the most interesting thing in existence, obviously. And by doing that, then we move towards each other. We get united in that. So in that way, like God is actually the third part of our marriage, and what can actually bring us together, as opposed to just being two human beings with our own abilities that are trying to understand each other.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sure does. The biohacking stuff that's just what I did at the time that worked, and I fixed the problem. So I have no opportunity to split test the biohacking tools versus my Christian faith as tools for fixing maybe in the future in my relationship, there'll be a challenge. There'll be a challenge where that's what where I can rely more on the model, the model of our relationship with our Creator being manifest in our in our marriages. Maybe I'll get back to you on that.
Yeah, I mean, I know that I'm going to have more crises and dramas happening in my marriage in the future. I think it's kind of unavoidable. Do you have kids yet, Jonathan?
No, we're hoping for next year, making the magic happen. So we're doing all the fertility optimization stuff now.
Normally that requires a death and a rebirth of what you think you are normally, to be able to manage the additional responsibility that just comes in from, it's fairly easy to be married, and there are challenges, obviously, but that's where I failed. My first marriage is we had a child, and then everything was going fine and well, but then the having another human being, that you have to learn to love there. That's why I think it's a very powerful thing. Probably you can call it a biohack, having kids with another human being and staying together and making that work, and making, it can be a source of an amazing meaning and depth and love. And it can also be a massive source of stress and pain and suffering. If it's, and it's all about the mindset, I guess, and to tell you the truth, I mean, Jonathan, I think one can get through this with all kinds of other things. I think that in many ways, our ethics, our values, and our society, the Christian ethic has been embedded in there. And so I think a lot of people can not think about, Christianity and still manage these things. I've just found in my own life, going to the source. So me and my wife, we will every night, every evening, we stand together in front of our icon corner, and we say some prayers together. And we do that, and our sons are normally there as well. This kind of plugs us together into the source of all things somehow, right? Good.
And in between your first marriage and your second marriage, you dabbled some with Tantra. Is that right?
More than dabbled, yeah. I went fully into... basically what happened is I came to the end of secularism and realized that there needed to be more in life than just matter and rationality in my kind of, very materialist understanding of it, because it wasn't enough for me. And so then I started a spiritual search, where initially it was like everything but Christianity that I was searching. So I went fully into the most radical and extreme practices, actually, that I could find, in a kind of desperate attempt to find meaning in life and kind of revitalize spirit. I think that's, when I look back at it now, that's what I realized I was doing. I was trying to find the spark of spirit, and looking for spiritual experience instead of just kind of dry, desolate materialism, basically.
Sure. I never got into the spiritual side of Tantra, really. I have just used it to enjoy the full body orgasms and the full body orgasms, the non ejaculatory orgasms, and the benefits of semen
Yeah.
retention.
So you haven't really got
So
into Tantra. You've just got into like what some Westerners have used this term Tantra to, because Tantra is a religious system, like that's what it is.
sure, yeah.
But like you could call it neo Tantra, perhaps. It's like a Western bastardized version, really, which is like a kind of mishmash of some New Age philosophies, but mainly just like intimacy and then semen retention practices or something like that, which is Brahmacharya is the initial tantric term for semen retention, Brahmacharya, which is like continence, basically.
And the Western there is a very degenerate westernized scene of people that do I think they call them play parties. They do these sex parties. You have gurus that are abusing women, abusing men. Even yeah, that's a scene that I stay really far away from. I've heard nothing good about it. It seems like a pathway to cuckoldry to me. So no thanks to that. But I first heard of Tantra many moons ago on a day game podcast. And one of the pickup artist instructors was describing it as a loyalty hack. And he was talking about how he had a girlfriend and he liked his girlfriend. He was monogamous. He didn't want to cheat on his girlfriend, but his job was to show students how to cold approach women on the streets of London. And he found that when he was doing Tantra, when he was dramatically decreasing the number of ejaculations that he had and having the full body orgasms, he found that this blunted his male drive to pursue the side punani. That this actually kept him loyal to his girlfriend, even though he was like approaching a lot of good-looking women out there. And I was intrigued by that. And as I have got over the years, I've gotten more serious about practicing Tantra, about practicing the techniques, practicing it during lovemaking. And I think I have found that that does contribute as a loyalty thing. So I think I would include that along with the monogamy life hacks. But the new age stuff, I think that could be a dark kind of spiritual.
I mean, for me, you're not practicing Tantra, you're practicing semen retention, and there's some visualization exercises in there as well, which are often combined, and those are obviously useful and valuable in just bringing your attention back to yourself and to what's actually happening. I think a lot of men and women have, like, again, images from the culture and from pornography that are filling our minds and influencing how we're seeing each other and objectifying each other. And so by, having focus on breath and presence with each other, and then obviously we have a whole generation of young men who are just like squirting their life energy into a piece of tissue paper in front of their computers every single day, right? And so this is so when guys stop doing that and stop ejaculating, then it's an incredibly powerful experience for them. So this definitely works. I don't think it has anything to do with Tantra. This is something that human society has known for a very, very long time. It's just with the sexual revolution that happened in the West, where we kind of thought, like, in some communities, like, having sex with someone is almost being kind of, put alongside like brushing your teeth or something like that. That's the way it's talked about in some aspects of society. Or maybe it's just like, doing something that's just enjoyable, like going for a run or whatever, or doing a yoga session. Obviously, sex is the most sacred thing that human beings can do. It's also the most private thing that you can do. And it's intended to be done with a life partner because it's something that very powerfully bonds you together with that human being if you treat it in the way it's supposed to be treated. And so this is something that, you know, all religious systems, all societies in human existence have always controlled people's sexuality in a way that's productive. And marriage is probably the oldest ritual and kind of societal contract in civilization. All civilizations are built on marriage. It's far older than you know, it's as old as culture and as human civilization itself. And that's been something that's been created to direct sexual energy to just be focused on one other person. And so obviously the less that you're ejaculating and using that energy up, and especially when you're directing it towards one human being, it creates a very powerful focus for you in your life. And so it's really just a very recent thing, this kind of like hippie idea of, oh, love should be free and we should just be able to share it with everybody, and you know, we can't control it and limit it, and that's some kind of ideal state of affairs. It's a very deluded and bad idea, and it's especially bad. It's bad for men, bad for women, especially bad for children as well. And we see, like, you know, birth rates collapsing in the West as well, and people having far less sex the more that we think that like sex is just something that we can do with whoever it is we feel like it, wherever it is. Like, you know, people have never had so little sex as they're having today, even though we're obsessed with sex. You know, see young men just can't think about anything but sex, always want to have with sex. Every time I talk about, if Christianity comes up in a conversation with somebody these days, then everybody starts asking about like, well, what about homosexuality and what about da 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 da? It's like, you know, it's like, are you homosexual yourself? Like, why is this so important to you? People are just like absolutely obsessed with it, but a lot of the time aren't having any of it themselves anyway. Like, we know that married men have far more sex and far better sex than unmarried men as well.
I do.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, great that you found a lot of these things, I think, as well. Maybe, Jonathan, I mean, you said in the beginning you would like to kind of tell the story of how you got into this whole biohacking thing and what was your pathway into it. Do you want to tell that story now? Oh,
sure. So it started with a gray Maserati. Gray Maserati. Gray Maserati Gran Turismo. There was this movie, I'm sure you remember it, Limitless with Bradley Cooper, 2011. And the preview of that movie caught my attention because he drives this gray Maserati. And I had driven that car shortly before that movie. I got entangled in this really perverse business situation where I had been working as a nightclub promoter in Denver. And this guy called me out of the blue one day because I had my cell phone number on these flyers. And he wanted to do all of these deals in the entertainment industry with me. And so I met him. I was skeptical, and he introduced me to this older gay man that he was associated with. And the older guy was a banker, and he had a number of businesses. He was, at least he seemed pretty successful. He told us that he was very wealthy, and he told us that he was going to give us just all of the money that we wanted to start an entertainment company, and that we could throw the biggest parties, we could have concerts, that he was going to just finance whatever dreams we might have of an entertainment company. And so, and they hired me to be the marketing coordinator of this company. And I was 22, 23 at the time. And they, as opposed to spending money, actually like building a business and doing events, they started buying ridiculous toys. So we bought a Cadillac Escalade, we bought a Mercedes, and then it turned out I would shortly discover that the financier of this company had dissociative personality disorder. He had multiple personalities. And when he would drink, these personalities would get really crazy. And one day he was driving this brand new Mercedes with my friend, and his malicious personality came out. And he told my friend he was going to kill him. And so he puts the pedal to the metal and runs a red light in the Mercedes, T-bones another car. Thankfully, everyone was okay. Wrecks the Mercedes. And then the very next day, we impulsively bought this brand new gray Maserati. And then more craziness and absurdity ensued. We all took a trip to Mexico together. And eventually, after maybe 6 months of this, it just became clear that the company wasn't going to go anywhere at all. And so I resigned, but I still had this great longing in my heart for that beautiful purring Maserati. And so I saw it in this movie Limitless, and I said, oh my God, I got to watch this movie. And then, as I'm sure you recall, it was this movie about this guy, and he takes the ultimate smart drug, NZT48. And I watched that movie and I said, I need to find that drug. And so that galvanized this obsession that I've had for 12 years now with this whole field of health and brain optimization. And I have tried over 200 different smart drugs or nootropics now at this point. It's driven me to, I've lived in a bunch of different countries, and yeah, it's been a real odyssey.
Sorry, I just realized I was muted. Yeah, that's a fascinating story, Jonathan. Thanks for sharing.
Have you tried nootropics?
No.
I bet you have.
No, I've tried hallucinogenics.
Aha.
Which I think in some way I was searching for. I think we assume that the solutions to all our problems are in the physical material realm, and we're looking for, it's like a great shortcut as well. Like I also see, like I know some people who have different sicknesses and health problems, and we're always looking for like the pill that you can take that can fix it. And it's just so clear sometimes with some of these people how I've been really fascinated with like this disconnection we have between our minds and our bodies, and between like the world of ideas and the physicality of things, and how we don't connect them together. And so how like sicknesses and ill health often is connected to the way that we live our lives and our beliefs about reality. Again, I would say that beliefs are more real than physicality. Actually, there's a so for me, I've had some very powerful, life-changing even experiences from the hallucinogenics, and it's been a very large part of my journey. And then I also don't recommend them to people anymore either, because I found that they don't have the solutions that I'm looking for. It was a misunderstanding based on a belief that physical reality is where that's the most real thing in reality, and that it's where the answers are to be found. I found that that mindset doesn't work for me.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of psychedelics either. I did an ayahuasca ceremony once upon a time in the Andes, and I got nothing out of it. And then after that, I did some more in-depth research into psychedelics, because I have hundreds of videos about nootropics. So people would ask me about them a lot. And the research indicates with psychedelics, what you get is it does hack your personality. It does, they can change your personality, but what the consistent effect seems to be is that it increases openness to experience. So it kind of makes people a bit more open-minded. But then what it does is it decreases, and this is a personality effect. This is not just when you're on the drug. The personality effect is it decreases risk tolerance. And so I was like, this is not actually a very good combination of things, of making people or it decreases like risk assessment capacity. So it's like, that is not really a very good combination for like the masses to be imbibing. Is something, okay, openness, that's good, sure. But if you're at the same time decreasing your risk assessment capacity, that is going to result in, that is not going to have positive kind of for a lot of people that can take them down a dark pathway. And with my perception is that it seems to me that people, when they're talking about, I'm not hearing really people's discoveries and epiphanies when they're on psychedelics strike me as the profundity of a kiddie pool. I'm not, I'm not hearing very many people who are saying that, oh, I did psychedelics and then I decided to get married and have a family, or I did psychedelics and then I decided to get out of the abusive relationship. I don't hear.
Well, I mean, what
happens,
I think, Jonathan, is that people do psychedelics and they realize that there's more to existence than just than what we see in front of us, right? And so I think that was the role that it played for me. I believe that I could have had that experience in other ways, which would have been better for me. It's a shortcut, and I don't think shortcuts are very good when it comes to spiritual growth or just maturity. I think that doing the hard work is what builds the strongest foundation. And so taking the shortcuts is a childish approach that gives more childish results. But I think a large amount of people, there's a massive group of people who are really interested in psychedelics these days. And I think for a lot of them, it's because they're stuck in this secular materialist worldview, and they feel that it's just like it's zombification, really, that it's creating like this zombie culture. And so I think for these people, it's a way of breaking out of that and breaking out of the kind of like foundational assumptions that are as you say, like they have a lack of openness to seeing, I would say, reality the way it is. And that was my experience as well. It's like I was so focused on the scientific paradigm as the only one. You know, I'd been a new atheist, one of these new atheists that was going around telling people how religion was like the worst thing in existence, right? And so I think that was really blocking my way of being able to see things more clearly.
Yeah.
I'm curious about, when you're talking about these smart drugs, what has been your conclusion now after trying so many of them, and has there been good things and has there been less good things that have happened from it?
So people are always curious, what is the best smart drug? I get that question a whole lot.
I guess it depends, right?
Of course. Mm-hmm. However, the one that I'm consistently real impressed with is called piracetam. And it falls within this category called the racetams. And this is a category of pharmaceuticals that has been around, and it's been studied for about 40, maybe 50 years now. And piracetam in particular has been the subject of hundreds and hundreds of human clinical studies, including long-term population studies. There was like a town in France full of old people where they basically gave all the old people in the town piracetam for 20 years and then did follow-up analysis of the effects on it. So it's extraordinarily safe, and it helps with a lot of different cognitive capacities. So first of all, just obvious benefit, it will give you a bit more energy and pep and motivation. People will often report that it ups their verbal horsepower, that they are a bit more articulate when they're on it. It also has an effect after you take it for 10 days, 14 days, maybe 3 weeks. It will open up your long-term memory, episodic memory, semantic memory. You'll find yourself remembering odd little things out of your childhood when you're on it. So having tried a bunch of different smart drugs, that one I recommend quite. I talk with a lot of biohackers. I have people that I do 30-minute free consultations with. And often I'll direct people towards that one. It's a little bit harder to get these days. It's not like one of these supplements that's sold a bunch of different places online, but that one seems to, or that whole category of the racetams seems to be a major crowd pleaser. And I describe nootropics as the gateway drug to personal development, because anybody who's taking on a major personal or professional development endeavor, whether they face this catch-22, which is that to change your life in a meaningful way, whether it's maybe you want to start a new business, or you want to write a book, or you want to get in really amazing shape, or let's say like you don't have a girlfriend, you're a single sexually frustrated guy and you want like a family. Like this is a huge project that you're taking on, and this is going to take years of motivational fuel to see this thing through to fruition. But often the personal development or professional development things that people are doing, these things don't start paying you back with more motivation until you're like a couple of years into them. Like with meditation, you need to do meditation for like 6 months until it's really benefiting you to the point where you're gonna say, okay, I'm motivated enough to do this consistently. Or if you're trying to get in really good shape in the gym, you need to put in months and months and months, maybe 12 months of work there in the gym before you start seeing the kind of results where it becomes a self-perpetuating motivational cycle. And this is where I think nootropics are really indispensable, because nootropics will fuel you. The good nootropics, the right ones, will fuel us with motivation and focus and imperviousness to distraction. And they do it fast. They do it within 30 or 60 minutes of dosage, and you've got the motivation that you need, and you don't end up in this pattern where you start a new thing, but you don't quite have enough discipline, motivation, and attention to finish it. And then you quit the thing, you get burnt out, you're disappointed in yourself, and you go through you get into this cycle of history where you just become more and more cynical about yourself. So that's why I am the internet's smart drug dealer. That's why I'm a relentless proponent of them.
Okay, interesting. So I think it's a good time for me to put forward my criticism then, based on that, because I don't believe that motivation comes from pills. Motivation comes from aiming at the right thing. So it's the highest thing that you're aiming for. That's what's going to determine your ability to follow it through. And I don't think if you choose the wrong thing, then I think any number of drugs or anything else won't help you in doing that. So you call it biohacking, right? And so I was around, actually. I was a teenager when the first hackers kind of came onto the scene. And so I saw you described a hacker as a person who gains complete control of a system. And that's not really my understanding of what a hacker is. And I don't think the stories we have of hackers are people who have complete control over a system. What I see is a hacker is actually someone who, it's often someone who lives in the shadows, who sees a problem, a big problem of some kind. And so they decide to try and do something about it. And so they aim at, and what I often see is they only see a small part of the problem, which they identify and aim towards. And then they use kind of like, almost like it's a modern day magician somehow, a technological magician, to gain control over something that gives them a feeling of control. But because they're only, I would call it misguided, they're aiming just at one small part of the whole thing, then that victory of gaining some small control over some small system, the lack of a holistic understanding of reality and humankind and society and everything, leads to a long-term continued living in the shadows and a continued kind of really in a long-term state of collapse, because it's not aimed at a high enough thing. And it's also built on this idea of no limits. And so it's married to also to this transhumanist idea of that there are no limits and I can gain complete control and it can all be in me. And so, that's a really deification. It is self-deification to believe that I can, control all of these things and change it all. And it's not a recognition that actually things are outside of my control. And I need to trust to a certain extent in existence because I'll never understand them. And so I need to, there's an element that needs to come of surrender, which I think is what, wisdom traditions and religion gives us, is tools to be able to have this right relationship to reality, instead of this kind of scientific transhumanistic thing. Is like, no, for me, it's a Tower of Babel that you're building, and we can build really big towers of Babel, but the problem is that they just don't last. They collapse at some point. It collapses in the story of the Tower of Babel is that people start talking different languages. So it's basically our fundamental beliefs about reality, our fundamental understandings of reality means we just see reality differently. And so we speak different languages, we don't understand each other, and then things go off in for different directions. And I think that's where the whole thing ends up, because the hacker at the end of the day, he's sitting there in his parents' basement. He doesn't understand the full complexity of reality. He doesn't see the entire picture, but he takes matters into his own hands and thinks, no, I can doctor the system. And the problem is, like, all these different hacks, they actually interact with each other in different and unpredictable ways that are not fully controllable. You're never going to be able to understand what a human, the most advanced, we don't even understand what consciousness is. We don't understand what a human being is. From a scientific perspective, from a kind of this engineering way of doing things.
Sure. I'll address that good philosophical point that you made, but I also I'll first address complete control, because that was the definition that Dave Asprey assigned to biohacking. And that is perhaps a little bit hyperbolic. I can give you an example, actually. A while back, after coming home from vacation at the Black Sea, I developed some tinnitus, just totally out of the blue. I developed some tinnitus, and it really tormented my sleep for about a week. It was awful. It was an awful thing. And I was mystified, baffled as to why I had tinnitus. And so I bought a book on tinnitus. And in the book, what they described, first of all, what I did was I did a bunch of Googling of tinnitus. And there's a bunch of silly things on YouTube about how to cure tinnitus, and none of that stuff worked. And then there's some supplements that are supposed to help with tinnitus, and those didn't help me. And so then I read this book, and they described meditation as a way of addressing tinnitus. And so essentially, you would do a number of meditation sessions where you were focusing your attention specifically on the ringing in your ears. And by focusing because what most people with tinnitus do is they try to ignore that annoying ringing in the ears.
Yeah.
And so, but by shifting the attention to focusing on it, your brain would habituate it. Your brain would get used to it. And that's totally how it worked for me. So I still have tinnitus. So I guess I can't say that I'm completely in control of that, but by using the right tool, which was this focused attention meditation, it's really not a problem for me anymore. I can sleep at night, even with no little sound maker in the background, just fine. So yeah, complete control is probably a bit hyperbolic because our bodies are existing in this entropic universe. We have all these entropic forces in our bodies that we don't totally understand. However, I would kind of maybe balance your view there with this grounded Christian concept of taking dominion. Okay, I've been listening to some of these Christian nationalism podcasts, and I think they're in the same recommendation algorithm as Manifesto.
Okay.
And they talk a lot about taking dominion, is about how as Christians and how as men we are called in a very serious way. It's actually one of the most serious duties that we have is to take some control over things. So I think, I can totally see from the, for a secular, ungrounded kind of person, there's probably some, there's probably some mines in the biohacking
Jonathan,
field.
just to explain, like within Christianity, then the understanding is that one can gain complete control, but this control is a surrender to God. And then really one becomes then a vessel or a channel for the acts of God. And in the Orthodox faith, we have the saints as an example of what that looks like. And so what we have is people who are incredibly loving, incredibly humble, and very surprising types of people. So the taking dominion, I don't know, I think this looks very different in a kind of like evangelical Protestant framework. I don't know exactly who you've been listening to, but the dominion thing is really in the Orthodox faith and the saints, what you'll see is people who can perform wondrous things, but who live a life of complete humility, often in poverty as well. Actually, like a lot of them will live in complete poverty, but have tens of thousands of people visiting them all the time to just receive a drop of that wisdom that these people are sharing, because they're able to, they've surrendered their life to a life of service to others that's not focused at all on themselves. So that's what it is. It's not something that I aspire to do. I don't think I ever will live that way, but I think that I can see that in small ways in my life how that surrendering is actually a freedom. It's a type of becoming a servant of God is actually freedom in my life.
Sure. Yeah. I'd have to go to a monastery and ask a monk about how to reconcile those two things.
Yeah, it's a paradox, definitely. Yeah. Do you want to talk about the hacker thing as well? Like what a hacker is? Does that make sense? I think we're gonna have 5 minutes more here. Otherwise, maybe Jonathan, if I give you the last 5 minutes, where do you want to take the ball from here?
Oh, I'd love to share this short essay that I wrote about why I think it's the best time to be a man, because we should nowadays in the masculinity sphere, in the manosphere, we sure do hear a lot of complaining. Okay. And I really think that it's the best time to be a man. And here's why. Okay. The areaform digital realm of the manosphere is sometimes characterized as a monosphere because thoughtful men have a lot of complaints about modernity, about the appalling state of Western civilization, the bias and impediments we face in the contemporary workplace, the dumbing down of society, the retarded woke culture, the leftist politics wrecking our countries, and of course, the fallen state of the modern single woman. Having been steeped in manosphere content for at least a decade, while living in 7 different countries, I've reached the surprising conclusion that it's the best time to be a man. That might sound crazy. You might say, look how hard it is to get a good job, to keep up with the cost of living, to meet a nice girl, to stay healthy, and to raise a family these days. And you're right. But I think that a man philosophically should compare to the ideal and to the average. And in the final calculus, lean more towards the latter than the former. The fathering that I received from my dad was far from ideal, but compared to the average boomer dad, and certainly the historical average, my dad did a decent job. If you honestly compare life as a modern man in the roaring train wreck of the 2020s to any other era, it becomes clear that today, more than in any other time, you have more freedom to architect the life you want. Compare, and you'll start to liberate yourself from the victim mindset that the state of society is holding you back. If I were a man like myself in the 1980s or the 1990s, maybe I could have made more money in the booming economy, but there was no easy to find red pill knowledge about women. So I probably would have simply married the prettiest girl willing to sleep with me repeatedly. And then she would have gotten fat from toxic, mainstream, standard American diet. We would have gotten divorced, and I would have lost a bunch of the money that I would have made, along with my kids, maybe. If I were born in the 1960s or the 1970s, watching mankind's greatest leap live on black and white television would have been very special. But then I'd get drafted and go get a hard case of PTSD in Vietnam. In the 1970s, the economy was dog shit and the culture was deeply degenerate. This would have either ensnared me or corrupted whatever woman I ended up with. If I were born in the 1950s, it would have been pretty sweet to afford a brand new home, a new car, a dutiful stay-at-home wife, and yearly family vacations to some sunny place on my salary. But then my kids would grow up, go to college on my dime, and become utterly corrupt by the burgeoning cultural Marxist movements, which I would have not known to warn them about. If I were born in the 1930s or the 1940s, the Great Depression would have made the modern economy look like Zurich, Switzerland. Then I would get drafted to go fight in World War II. If I were born earlier than that, if I managed to not get my face blown off in a trench in World War I or taken out by the Spanish flu, well, swing dancing to jazz in the 20s would have been just spanky. And in any other era, yeah, maybe it would have been a little easier to meet a nice, marriageable maiden, but almost everything else about life sucked. You would have had less human and civil rights. Options for personal and economic edification were next to non-existent. Your work would have been backbreaking, unending labor. Life would have been, in 2 words, tedious and tiresome. And you could be forced to go fight and die at any time in some brutal war. You might think that guys in other historical eras had better sex lives with better women, but historically, actually less than 50% of men got the chance to reproduce. Many men simply never got to have sex because kings and warlords hoarded women in harems. In relatively recent European society, unless you achieve some success, no patriarch would give you his daughter's hand in marriage. In any era, a man's life is rife with struggle and challenge. And in their relative absence, we get weak men that make bad times. Looking at you, boomer dads. But only in modernity is that struggle and challenge overcome with the habitual rejection of comfort, which will launch you on an invigorating odyssey of personal transformation that makes you happier, healthier, and freer. I wouldn't want to have been born at any other time than 1985.
Great, Jonathan. I think that was a great way to finish off and summarize. And thank you so much for having a good open conversation with me and just exploring these topics. I think it's been really valuable and interesting. Where do people find you if they want to read more about biohacking and your work?
That would be limitlessmindset.com. And if people are curious about some of the sex hacking and the monogamy hacking, which is probably the most useful things that we discussed here, I created a playlist on odyssey.com on the free speech YouTube alternative, where I've got a bunch of videos and podcasts that go deeper on all that. So yeah, that'd probably be a pretty good resource to link up along with Limitless Mindset. Final call to action. If there's any Orthodox Bulgarian brats listening, hit me up, because I'm here in Sofia and it'd be great to meet some guys here. I know you have a substantial European audience, so I bet there's someone out there.
Did you know that Jonathan Pageau is married to a Bulgarian woman as well?
He must have good taste.
Sorry?
He must have good taste.
I agree.
I actually don't know him.
Jonathan Pageau.
Have you interviewed him?
He's been my biggest inspiration over the last 5 years. I've not only interviewed him several times, but I've actually brought him to Denmark and had him talk at some of my events that I put together. He was the main speaker at the European Men's Gathering in 22 or 21, I think. Yeah, I've had the privilege of hanging out with him and having him here at my house sometimes. So he's a really, really big inspiration. And a lot of my ideas come from him, actually. So yeah, can recommend checking him out if you thought anything I said had some value.
Oh, I'm sure I listened to so many of your interviews. I probably listened to one with him, but I just didn't catch his name. I don't think.
Okay. Well, I actually mentioned the video that I mentioned right in the beginning of our conversation with Douglas Murray, Jordan Peterson, and Jonathan Pageau. That's I'd say that's a really good one to start with, actually. So I'll send that link. I'll put the link in the description of the video here.
Oh yeah, awesome.